Bitterness and astringency. What's the difference? Let's look at it together. Hi guys, this is Gabriele from nannuoshan, where we share our pleasure to drink and discover genuine farm tea. If you also, like us, are interested in expanding your tea knowledge and brewing skills, well, make sure to click on the subscribe button if you haven't done it yet, and go ahead, give us a thumbs up if you enjoy watching the video. Today we are speaking about let's say a misunderstanding in the tea world, and in particular the fact that astringency and bitterness are two fairly different things, but many times they are mixed one for each other, and in particular actually astringency, which is the less common, or if you want the less known aspect of the drinking experience, is mixed up with bitterness, and it felt like it would be bitterness, but it's not. So let's do a video to clarify, I thought, this difference between the two aspects. And let's start maybe with bitterness, which is what every one of us is most used to. So bitterness is one of the 5 basic tastes, along with sourness, saltiness, sweetness, and umami. So you experience bitterness not only in life but also in food. For example, chocolate, bitter dark chocolate is a good example. Of course, a coffee, even an espresso, let's say very concentrate without sugar, has also a bitter taste, and even tea has a bitter taste. Is always often brought as an example of bitter taste. So, I mean, I know you know what is bitterness, right? We don't have to spend too much time about speaking about it, but what is important is that the bitter taste act in our mouth basically in the following fashion. You have bitter substances in the tea leaves that when they enter in contact with our mouth, they interact with the bitter taste receptors. So what happens is that you have this molecule from, let's say, the tea leaves, and here you have a receptor. The molecules navigate to the receptor, clack, it attaches to the receptor, to the taste receptor, and these give a signal, ping, to our brain and tells that's bitter. That's the way we realize bitterness. And bitterness in nature is meant as an alarm. It's supposed to be actually a bad taste. Now, of course, it depends on how bitter and the amount of bitterness, but as a matter of fact, the plants and also the tea plant do use bitter substances to keep, for example, pests and insects away, so that when the insects bite the leaves, it says, oh, that's bitter, I don't want to bite it, and goes away. So it's a way of protecting himself. Now, bitterness in tea can be pleasant for sure. Yeah, there is an aspect of bitterness that is pleasant, but when it is too much, for example, when we forgot the brew and we oversteep, it tends to become an unpleasant taste. I'm steeping here a pour. This is actually the second steep. I've done one before starting filming. The first one had no bitterness, and this has a clear bitterness. I really feel it here, and it's, I mean, you know what I'm talking about, right? And I choose a shank pour, a raw pour, because it's a characteristic example. Not always, but many times a shank pour, especially if oversteeped, turns out bitter. And I want to see if this tea will also turn out astringent. Astringency. So what is astringency? Well, it's so different from bitterness that astringency is not even a taste. So there is no taste receptor for identifying astringency. The way that our body perceives astringency is actually through a tactile sensation, to a touch sensation, to a feeling. It actually acts directly at the nerves level. There is the trigeminal nerves in the mouth that when it's activated, it gives the signal to the brain there is astringency. And now astringency is, I think the best way to describe it is to say that astringency is a drying feeling. It's a texture, it's not a taste. It's like a physical sensation in your mouth when the mouth becomes drier and drier. You might have experienced that, for example, with fruit that are not yet ripe, unripe fruits. Unripe fruit are not bitter, but tends to be astringent. A classical example of astringency is actually the grapes, in particularly red and dark grapes, and the skin of the grapes is astringent, and that's the reason why astringency is present in red wine, because of it comes from the grapes basically. And if you want to do an experiment yourself to really grasp what astringency is, you can take a grape, the darker the better, you put it in your mouth, and without chewing you just press it towards the top of the mouth, towards the palate, with your tongue, and you work it until actually you squeeze it until you can extract the pulp. You swallow the pulp and you still keep the skin of the red grape in your mouth. You pass it over again, you bring it to the molar and you chew it, and this will bring you this drying sensation that I'm talking about, astringency. And let's see if I get some astringency here. Not yet actually, but sometimes it happens with tea that you have this really drying sensation. Sometimes also, not only with red wine, I know sometimes champagne brings you this drying sensation in your mouth that is not necessarily unpleasant. A little bit of dryness, a dry touch is not bad at all actually, and in fact shampooer have this dry touch. Shall I keep it a bit longer? I keep it a bit longer to see what happens. So, just to summarize a little bit, we say bitterness is a taste, is a basic taste that activates taste receptors. And astringency is not a taste, is a texture, is a physical sensation in our mouth of drying. And maybe you might ask yourself, yeah, but I mean, Gabriele, you just said that bitterness are molecules that activate our taste receptor. How does, I don't know which molecules activate the astringency sensation? Well, first of all, there are molecules in tea, in particular, for example, the tannins, that are a type of polyphenol that are present in tea, have an astringent feature. And what they do the following. Basically, our saliva, that is basically made almost entirely of water, maybe I should pour it, that is almost made entirely of water and proteins. It happens that these large molecules are somewhat very reactive and tends to bind together with other molecules that are also very reactive. So they tend to bind with water molecules and also actually with proteins that are present in our saliva as well. So you have to imagine these fairly big tannins molecule that enter our mouth, and then they start taking out of our saliva molecules of water, proteins, they bind it to it, and they agglomerate and become a much larger molecule. So it precipitates in our mouth, and the saliva lose a little bit, sometimes a lot, of its lubricating feature. And that's why we have this dry sensation on the tongue and all around the mouth. Let's see with this cup. No, this is not astringent, it's still bitter, it's not astringent. But let's say, sometimes you may find some shampooer that are astringent indeed. Alright, I hope this was of help. I know by experience that there is a lot of confusion about the topic. Try yourself, when you taste the tea, ask yourself, is it bitter or it's simply drying out my mouth. Be aware that the two things often come together, and that may be the source of the misunderstanding, the fact that often bitterness comes along together with astringency, and sometimes even sour taste come along together with astringency. An example is, well, we say grapes, but also, for example, cranberries have a very astringent and sour taste. So that's all I wanted to tell you today about bitterness and astringency. Let me know in the comment below if the distinction is clear to you, if you have experienced the difference between bitterness and astringency, and you have some example for us and for the tea community of teas that are rather bitter or rather astringent. Thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget, if you're not one of our subscribers, to subscribe our channel and give us a thumbs up if you've enjoyed watching this video. Thanks a lot guys, and I will see you in the next one.